When I was around 11, there was a small door in my bedroom that led to the attic. For a couple of years, it became a habit of mine to shut that door every time I went into my room, maybe a few times a week. At first, I didn't think much of it. I just assumed my mom hadn't closed it properly when she left. One day, I joked with her about it. She was complaining about me not picking up after myself, so I said, "Every night I have to close the attic door behind you. How about you just shut it all the way when you're done?" She looked at me kind of puzzled and said she hadn't even been in the attic for months. I asked my brother, "Nope." Asked my dad, "Nope." That's when I really started paying attention. I made sure it was closed every morning, checked it after school, after dinner, and right before bed. But every single time, the door was open again. For months, I kept watching it, trying to figure out what was going on. Eventually, I thought, what if I just don't close it? So one morning before school, I left it open and checked all day. After school, after dinner, before bed, still open. That night, lying in bed, my mind kept going back to that open door across the room. Something about it felt wrong. Finally, I rolled over and stared into the dark attic opening. That's when I saw it. A face, staring right back at me. I bolted downstairs, woke my parents, but my brother just laughed it off. After that, I switched rooms with him, and 6 months later, my family moved to a new house. Mostly because the household was getting bigger. Our old house was bought by the new physics teacher and his wife. I could have forgotten all about that night and chalked it up to an overactive imagination. But then, senior year, I found out how great our physics teacher was. He became my favorite. At the end of the year, a friend and I took our old VHS camcorder and went back to my old neighborhood, just messing around. We stopped by my old house for a tour, and I told stories about all the projects my dad had done there. The teacher's wife took us upstairs to show us the sewing room. I joked, "Notice anything strange about this room?" Her face went blank. On camera, she asked what I meant. I tried to laugh it off, but mentioned the attic door. She confirmed that every time she comes up to sew, the attic door is open. She told us that just 2 days after moving in, their German Shepherd went into that room, but refused to come back downstairs. The dog started barking, couldn't be calmed, and then jumped out a window, landing on the porch roof before running off. The dog didn't return until the next day, and has never stepped foot in the hallway leading upstairs since. I thought about showing the video to my family, but decided some things are better left alone. We had just moved from the West Coast to the Midwest. It wasn't easy. We had a huge family and couldn't find a place that could fit all of us. Eventually, one of our uncles offered to let us stay in the other half of his duplex. It was a huge 2-story house with a basement, and that's where my siblings and I would usually hang out. One night, probably around 1 or 2 in the morning, we were down there playing games when we noticed a door we hadn't seen before. It was built into the wall in a way that made it easy to miss, especially in the dark. None of us had the nerve to open it, so we dared each other back and forth, but eventually just left it alone. The next morning, we told our grandfather about the door. He went down into the basement, opened it up, and looked inside. It was a small, completely unlit room. The only light came from the basement itself, enough to faintly show that there was nothing obvious inside. But as he stared into the dark, I remember him quietly saying, "You stay right there." Not to me, to something in the room. He left without saying much and got my dad. A short while later, the two of them went out to a nearby farm and came back with a live chicken. My grandfather was a traditional shaman, and he handled everything with care and respect. He thanked the chicken, performed a small ritual, and then killed it. The blood was collected into a bowl. Then he went into his room and came back wearing his shaman hat, the kind that fully covers the face, and bells on his fingers. With the blood in hand, he opened the door to the basement room again and stepped inside. From where we were standing, we could hear him whispering prayers or incantations. The finger bells chimed softly as he moved around. At some point, he stopped speaking, and we heard the sound of the bowl moving on its own, almost like it was spinning in place. When the sound finally stopped, he stepped out of the room. His chanting grew louder, and somehow the sound echoed, even though he was standing right there. A moment later, he walked back in and came out holding the bowl again. This time, there was less blood, and something else inside. A small hand-stitched doll, wrapped in red twine. It was soaked in blood. Without saying anything, he struck a match and lit the doll on fire, right there in the bowl. He handed it to my father and said, "Make sure the fire stays lit. Don't stop until you're outside." I don't know how that bowl caught fire. Chicken blood shouldn't burn, and we never figured out what was actually fueling the flames. But the doll burned, slowly and completely. Later that night, I peeked into the room. There was still blood smeared on the walls, deep crimson stains you could only see if your flashlight hit the right angle. We had to clean it ourselves the next day, and the room was so dark it felt like the walls absorbed the light. That smell, like wet iron, stuck around for days. A few nights later, something else happened. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of my parents panicking. The house was full of smoke. My dad was running from the bathroom with a bucket of water, heading toward the basement stairs. My mom grabbed all of us kids and rushed us outside, then called the fire department. We all made it out, except my grandfather. My dad ran back inside to find him. It felt like he was gone for hours, but it was probably just a few minutes. When he finally came out, he was carrying my grandfather on his back, and strangely, my grandfather had his shaman hat on again, as if he'd been preparing for something. Years later, after my grandfather passed, I asked my dad where exactly he found him. He said the smoke was coming from near the basement stairs, and that he found my grandfather in a trance, standing in the corner and facing the wall. My dad had to shake him out of it to get him to respond. Here's the weirdest part. The fire department said there was no fire, no flames, nothing had been burning. They said it looked like the fire had somehow put itself out, but there was no source, no damage. Still, the walls in the kitchen and basement were stained with smoke, and the smell of burnt wood lingered for weeks. We never opened that door again. A few years ago, I had this overnight babysitting job. I'd show up around 11 p.m. once the parents left for work, and basically just sleep in the guest room while their 9-year-old son slept upstairs. Since he was under 13, someone had to be in the house, but honestly, the job was just making sure nothing burned down. Easiest money ever. The only downside? The house was in a sketchy part of town. One night, just a few days before Halloween, the mom called me in a panic. She needed to leave earlier than usual and asked if I could come over right away. I was across town, so it'd take me about 45 minutes to get there. She said it was fine. The kid would only be alone for about 35 minutes, and it was a one-time thing. So I get there as fast as I can, park in front of the house, and start grabbing my stuff from the car. That's when I notice a cat out of the corner of my eye. It's weaving around my legs, rubbing up on me, like it knows me. Thing is, this family didn't have a cat. Their son was severely allergic. I'd worked there for over a year, and had never seen a stray nearby either. As I'm walking up the path, this white, windowless painter van pulls up and parks right in front of the house. Total creeper van. The back doors swing open, and 2 guys hop out. One of them asks me for directions to the nearest gas station. I tell him how to get there, 2 blocks down, 4 over, and then the driver rolls down his window and says, "Could you just hop in and show us?" That's when the cat loses its mind. It shrieks like it's in a fight to the death, bolts between me and the van, and then launches itself at one of the guys. Swear to God, this fluff ball climbs his leg like a tree and starts clawing the hell out of him. The guy screams, stumbles back, and both of them dive into the van. They speed off so fast the doors are still swinging open. And then, just as calmly, the cat walks back to me like nothing happened. It sits at my feet, lets me scratch its ears, purring like we're old friends. Then it casually walks off toward the backyard and disappears. At the time, I thought maybe I'd imagined half of it. It was just too weird. But then, about a week later, a woman matching my age and build went missing in that same neighborhood. The The reports mentioned an unmarked white painter van seen nearby. I called the police and gave them a full statement. Left the cat part out, obviously. Nothing ever came of it. I never heard back, and I never saw that cat again. I've only told a couple people this story, one of them being the mom I worked for. She's convinced it was some kind of guardian angel. I'm not the superstitious type, but honestly, I can't think of a better explanation. Every year around Halloween, this memory creeps back into my head, and every time I think about it, I still wonder where that cat came from and how it knew to protect me.